I'm joined now by the founder of Zeteo, Mehdi Hasan. Mehdi, thanks for joining me.
Brian, good to be back.
So I want to start with some breaking news that we saw today, and that is that Donald Trump has allowed his FBI, with the help of Kash Patel, to now go after these Texas legislators who fled the state to go to Illinois. So first and foremost, can I have your reaction to the fact that this is, despite what Kash Patel said in his confirmation hearing about not wanting to weaponize the Department of Justice, that's exactly what we're seeing right now?
It was inevitable, Brian, that this was going to happen. This was the very reason that Kash Patel was picked, to be the yes man. Donald Trump has wanted Kash Patel in a position of national security intelligence for a while. You'll remember after the last election, he tried to make him deputy director of the CIA. Gina Haspel, at the time, career CIA official, said she would quit if that happened. He bided his time, got convicted, got reelected, and brought back Kash Patel to a compliant Republican Senate that knew he wasn't qualified to be FBI director, knew he would be a yes man, knew he would politicize the bureau in a way that they've always accused Democrats of doing. And this is what he's doing. By the way, Brian, we're speaking on a day when actually Kash Patel was supposed to be at J.D. Vance's house today, chatting about Epstein. And then that leaked out, so they canceled the whole thing, and Vance has been denying it in the Oval Office today that it was ever going to happen. But it's funny that they went straight from being one kind of politicized FBI director to be like, all right, I'll do something else today, political. I'll go after Democrats in Illinois. Like, that's what his day job is, to serve Trump.
Yeah. Mehdi, do you think that what we're seeing right now from some of the Democrats out there, there are a few governors who are vowing to fight back against what Texas Republicans are doing. We see Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker. We've seen to some degree Kathy Hochul in New York, although she's limited by what New York's Constitution allows them to do. Although I would also make the argument that Republican states have been limited by what they're able to do, and they've done it anyway. We saw unconstitutional maps enacted in Louisiana and Alabama, and still they did that at such a late time that even though the courts noted that they were unconstitutional gerrymanders, it was too close to the election for them to change it. They relied on the Purcell doctrine. So I think if there was really a desire to get this stuff done, we don't have to look far to see what it looks like when those Republican governors get it done. But that notwithstanding, do you think that that we're seeing something of a sea change among Democrats who have for so long been the party of strongly worded letters?
I hope so. I'm going to reserve judgment until I see some actions back up those words. Illinois Governor Pritzker, New York Governor Hochul, and California Governor Newsom have all said the right things. Now they just got to do it. As you say, there are some limitations, but these are the same limitations that Republicans overcome all the time. You and I, at the Zeteo event in LA, talked at great length in front of the audience about the Senate parliamentarian and how Senate Democrats deferred to the parliamentarian and said, well, she said we can't do a minimum wage increase. She said we can't put this in our bill. Republicans came along and they refused to even meet with the parliamentarian when they did their big ugly ass bill. So that is the difference in the two parties. I hope, and I've said this before to you and to others, I hope Democrats learn the right lessons from this period of opposition. That when their opponents get into power, they're not limited by conventions or norms or all the other things that now seem so quaint and antiquated. And you can't play this whole moral high ground game. We're like, well, they're going to do this stuff, but we're going to stay pure. Doesn't work like that. You do that and you lose. And it's worse than just losing. You do that and you abandon your constituents who need you.
Mehdi, we've spoken about this idea that what the future of the Democratic Party is going to look like is not necessarily whether progressivism wins out or a more moderate posture wins out, but rather this idea of Democrats who are actually going to stand up and fight. Do you agree with that? Do you think that the future of the Democratic Party is not so much like the monolithic nature of your political ideology, but rather just your willingness to go balls to the wall?
I've been saying that for a while. I said that when Democrats were in office as well. I think, the left-right dimension is still important in policy terms, for sure. But in terms of saving American democracy, standing up to the Republican Party, it's less relevant. It's about who actually has the balls, the backbone, the ability, the desire, the communication skills to actually take the fight to the other side and fight on their terrain, not your own terrain. I would say someone like Zohran Mamdani, who is the New York Democratic mayoral candidate, is a perfect mix of those two things. He's shown that you can actually have progressive radical policies, shake things up, tax the rich, look after your constituents, freeze the rents. You can have a Bernie-esque, if we want to call it that, agenda. But people forget he's also the guy who showed up at Albany to protest Tom Homan in person a few months ago, right? He was there on the front lines. Like he didn't just write a sternly worded letter or say, I'm going to do X and Y when I'm at. He turned up, put his body on the line, got grappled by police officers and heckled, rightly so, the fascistic Homan, the border chief. So I think Zoran Mamdani has walked a great line on this in terms of making sure he's standing up to Trump, standing up to Trumpism, calling out Republicans, but also doing what constituents and the Democratic base wants right now, which is more progressive policies, less corporate-friendly policies, less pro-rich policies. I think you can do both. One thing I would say about the governors so far is, again, we need to say if the actions match the words. We need to see what they actually do. And I think the key when we get to 2028 is, yes, are you going to take on Trump rhetorically, or are you going to do it actually with actions, with policies, with positions? I'll give you one example. Cory Booker gave a 26-hour speech, whatever it was earlier this year. Speech, broke the record for Senate speeches. I believe that speech is now a book, and he's going to be doing a book tour. He went straight to the top of the class in terms of opinion polls. You saw those polls, Brian. Suddenly he was like in the top 3 presidential candidates. People were saying to me, oh, Cory Booker's going to be a favorite. I was like, come on, we're 3.5 years out from 2028. No polls now have any meaning. Let's see what happens going forward. Immediately, his poll numbers dropped. Why? Because liberals were upset with him because he voted to confirm Charles Kushner, Jared's dad, as ambassador to France. I believe he was the only Senate Democrat who did that. And the left is really upset with him because he then went and signed off on another set of weapons sales to Benjamin Netanyahu in the middle of an ongoing genocide. And now, suddenly, it's gone downhill. People don't like him so much anymore. So this thing, between now and 2028, you and I and many others are going to have a lot of conversations about who's up, who's down. And ultimately, it's not just who's saying the right thing, but who's doing the right thing.
Okay, so we just spoke about how it's not necessarily progressive versus moderate that's going to be the thing moving forward. But so much of the energy is in the progressive wing of the party when you look at Bernie and AOC doing their tour, when you look at the success that Zoran Mamdani has had in New York. And so what would be your advice, I guess is the question, to these more moderate members of the Democratic Party? Again, knowing that representing a moderate district like Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez or Jared Golden, we want those people because the alternative to them is going to be, some Republicans. So when we have these conservative Democrats, part of being in a big tent is being in a big tent, right? It's being tolerant enough that even when there's somebody whose ideology doesn't comport 100% with ours, that's okay. Because again, part of being in a big tent is being tolerant of those people who have views that aren't directly ideologically aligned. But what would your advice be to those folks to get the same degree of, I guess, passion or excitement behind them as we're seeing from these members of the progressive wing of the party?
So again, I think it comes back to what do we call left and what do we call right? I mean, some of this stuff is just, now we use the phrase populist, standing up to the establishment, which can be populist right, populist left. You mentioned Jared Golden. If memory serves me correctly, Jared Golden supports Medicare for all. He sees that as something that helps his constituents, even though, as you say, he's in a very conservative frontliner district. I think Zephyr Teachout did a quite good study of frontline Democrats who are in these swing seats and are seen as conservative or moderate or whatever it is. And actually, a lot of them ran in 2024 in the congressional elections on a very populist platform, anti-big business, anti-price gouging, anti-big pharma. You can run in conservative districts on populist platforms because guess what? Conservatives don't like big pharma or big tech or big oil either. Right? Republican voters tell pollsters every day they don't like rich people being too rich. They don't like corporations not paying tax. They don't like the fact they don't have health care.
The pushback to that is going to be that people are going to say, okay, you say that Republicans say that they don't want all of these things, but they'll vote for a party that consistently heaps benefits, heaps subsidies onto fossil fuels, that continuously cuts taxes for millionaires and billionaires. And so the difficult part for me is when you understand this stuff and you understand what they have told pollsters and you look at the numbers and 90% of Americans want to impose an additional tax burden on the wealthiest Americans, but half of those people consistently vote for a party that does the complete opposite.
Well, I'll say two things to that. Number one, It's because Republicans have now successfully reinvented themselves as this kind of fake populist working party.
Yeah.
So you can, with a clear conscience as a working class American, say, well, I'm voting for Republicans and Trump because they're sticking it to the man and they're giving me no taxes on tips and all that bullshit that's been sold to them as some kind of populist agenda. And you ignore the tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. You ignore all the gifts to corporations and the deregulation and the Doge stuff. So that's one issue, is that the Republicans have successfully done that. And the way they've been able to successfully do that, Brian, aside from just brazenly lying, is the Democrats left the space open for them. Let's just be very honest about that. The only way the Republicans were able to occupy that pro-worker, anti-establishment platform that Donald Trump came up with in 2016, which he never believed in and never acted on, is because the space was left open. Nature abhors a vacuum, right? The Republicans could never have occupied that space had Democrats not vacated that space. And I think most Democrats would probably agree with that analysis now. Maybe not 5 years ago. I think pretty much entire party leadership now accepts that is true. That's point number one. Point number two, the Republicans are very good, as you know better than me, you wrote an entire book, they're cynically switching attention, deflecting, culture wars, right? So they know, and this has been the trick since Reagan and even before Reagan, Nixon, that they know they can't win on the economics. They know that the American public consistently for decades do not support wealthy people avoiding taxes. They do not support corporations getting away with murder. So what they've done is they say, well, let's talk about abortion. Let's talk about DEI. Let's talk about trans kids. Let's talk about Mexican immigrants. Let's talk about Sharia law, right? They have been the masters of switching, getting people to vote against their own material and economic interests because they think they're voting for some higher cause, for God, for country, for morality. All bullshit, but they've successfully done that. They've raised the salience of culture war issues while, ignoring or deflecting or side playing the economic stuff. And I think Democrats need to find a way. There's no simple solution to this. I'm not pretending it's easy, but they have to find a way to both A, win the culture wars, because I don't think you can run away from culture wars, but also B, bring attention back in the way that AOC or Mamdani in New York did, or Harris did. Let's not forget, Kamala Harris in August of last year was leading in the polls. She had all the momentum. She was talking about price gouging and greedflation and all of that. And then after the DNC, she stopped talking about all of that. Some people say it's because her brother-in-law from Uber persuaded her not to. Who knows what happened behind the scenes? But we know the campaign markedly changed from going after those populist targets. And that didn't help her.
Yeah. I think also, if you look at the massive advantage that Republicans and right-wingers have in the alternative media space, which is the space that you and I occupy, that allows them to drive the conversation. If we just simply do not have the number of voices that they do, eventually they're going to win out. Eventually, if they just have more voices, they are louder, they are going to win out. And it doesn't help that they have unlimited funds that can put money behind that stuff, so that turning an entire election into a referendum on transgender reassignment surgeries in prison becomes the issue when Kamala Harris didn't even mention it one time in this entire campaign.
But if Democrats, to go back to your point at the beginning, Brian, had fighters, I agree, you can't do anything about the media playing field. It is what it is. That is the way it is. They have an advantage. But it doesn't help that not only do they have an advantage, they also are up against a party that is not ready for a fight, is not willing for a fight. So, how many members of the House are there? 200. How many Democratic members of the House are there? 200 and something.
213, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, how many of you and I heard of? We do this for a living. I couldn't name half of them. What are they doing? Where are they? They're not all over your TV screens. They're not all over your social media. They're not all over your town halls. Most of them are living a quiet life, keep their head down, put their heads up for election time. To be fair to Republicans, as much as I loathe a lot of the people in the House right now, they're everywhere. You can't blink. There's some new provocative member of the House pops up. I could probably name to you more Republican House members than I could Democratic House members, because they're all over everything. And that's because they want to have a fight, right? And by the way, they also have amazing message discipline, right? Once the diktat has come down from Trump or Bannon or whoever it is, Miller, that's it. They all go, this week is DEI week. This week, we're only going to talk about trans, right? Democrats don't have that. We know that. You and I banged our head against walls saying, where is it? When there's like today, I'll give you one example. This morning I wake up to the NPR story that Donald Trump put a man from the January 6th riots who said, kill cops on camera. He said we should kill cops at January 6th. He's now an official at the Department of Justice. Not only did Trump pardon him, he gave him a job at the Justice Department. Now, a few years back, Black Lives Matter protests, some random people not associated with the BLM leadership said pigs in a blanket, fry them, some line about the police.
Yeah.
Republicans ran endlessly on that one quote. It became a household quote in every Fox-watching household. Every Republican's and Democrats are pro-killing the police. Black Lives Matter must be disowned. And by the way, Democrats went along with it and said, we disown all this. Are we going to see Brian, you answer the question for me. Are we going to see Democrats do that with this NPR story this morning? Yes or no?
No.
Oh,
No.
exactly. It'll be gone by tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and look, like I think you can go all the way up to today. I mean, you have even the Sydney Sweeney thing. I mean, like you have a few the right wing media ecosystem is so coordinated that you have a few accounts on TikTok and Instagram who have spoken about this issue that no national Democrats have weighed in on. And it goes all the way up to the president of the United States, because they know that if you can traffic in these culture wars, that's going to be better terrain for them. And so even if they have to pick some anecdotal thing from some random person on TikTok who is not an elected official, they'll do it because it helps them and they understand that. To that point, I want to move over to an issue that has broken through on culture, and that is the Epstein issue. And you and I spent so much of our time trying to get an otherwise pretty apathetic population to pay attention to politics, to understand why this stuff is so important. And every once in a while, an issue like Epstein rolls around where it actually breaks through in a way that you'll never have for a discussion on Medicaid or food assistance or the intricacies of our gun laws or whatever it may be, even though those things are much more important. But on this issue of Epstein, I'm curious to your thoughts here, because we've seen it break through, because we've seen Shane Gillis talk about this at the ESPYs, and we've seen all of these podcasters talk about it. And my friends and families who are not political, they understand what's going on.
Same.
Do you think that this has staying power, or, I mean, we still are in a news cycle that moves very quickly.
Yes.
This has been a month-long story. Is this going to be the kind of thing that sticks around, or that will eventually dissipate like everything else does?
The cynic in me says the latter. It will eventually dissipate. I hope I'm wrong. This is the first Trump scandal which was driven by Trump voters, not by Democrats. It's so funny when you see Trump in the Oval Office saying, was it yesterday, today? I've lost track of days, where he was asked by a reporter about Epstein, and he says, oh, this is just a Democratic hoax. This is pushed by the Democrats. I wish. Democrats have come very late to the party. They're rightly being accused of hypocrisy by Republicans who are like, I see Democratic members talk about Epstein, and then some Republican in the replies says, you never said anything about Epstein until 2025. And it's like, probably true, but I'm glad they're saying it now. Yeah. At least they realize the salience of this issue. But look, this was driven by Republicans. Trump cynically, Trump, Vance and co, they cynically use this to get their base out, to get their base worked up and enraged. And now they can't deliver on it, or they won't deliver on it. And I don't know. I mean, I'm torn on this one. On the one hand, there's enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that parts of the base are still furious about this, are still angry at Trump, have not let it go. But then the polling shows Trump hasn't really taken a dent at all in his approval ratings from his base. So I don't know. And you see people like Charlie Kirk, and I see you've been mocking him online, being a very good boy and telling Donald Trump that I'll do, I trust Trump. He told me not to talk about it, so I'm not talking about it. And Dinesh D'Souza and a bunch of others, right-wing influencers, we trust the White House. Time to move on. Now, whether the base moves on as well, I don't know. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene is one person who has refused to move on, is still causing a bit of a stir on some of this stuff. But I think in general, like, if I believe the Trump movement, the MAGA movement is a cult, which I do believe, then I have to also believe that they will fall along with this. I mean, I interviewed Mick Mulvaney recently. He did make a good point that, look, Donald Trump came out and said publicly a couple months back, MAGA is what I say it is, right? And the Epstein story is a test of that claim, right? Because if he's right, then they will move on. And Epstein is no longer an issue for the MAGA base. If he's wrong, then MAGA is beyond Trump. But they say, no, Epstein and pedophile scandals and QAnon is key to who we are. I do think, again, Democrats have to keep pushing this. The media still have to start asking questions. What the left and liberals don't seem to understand, which the right understands, is these scandals, these controversies, this is not organic. This doesn't just happen spontaneously. You need people to be pushing it, right? Especially for the media. We often say, you and I will rightly say, oh, New York Times isn't covering this story. It's not on its front page. But to be fair to New York Times, the New York Times needs kind of quote unquote permission to do that. And the way they get permission to do that in our system is they need a senior Democratic politician to hold a press conference and ask questions, or hold a hearing in Congress. Then,
I mean, you look at how Jim Jordan and James Comer, they give endless supply, endless oxygen to their insane conspiracy theory ridden.
Yeah, Fox doesn't operate in isolation. It's all coordinated. And the Democrats don't understand that. But I see a lot of, especially on the blue skies, a lot of liberal Democratic parties will say, oh, the media is just ignoring the story. And I'm not defending the media. I'm the last person to defend mainstream media. But you also have to ask questions about the Democratic Party. If the leadership of the party is not pushing this at the same time, it allows the media to move on. So you do need your Chris Murphys and your Brian Schatz and others to keep bringing this stuff up. Not just Epstein, but the multiple other scandals that are going on.
Right.
Take one other scandal. The plane from Qatar that he's now spending $1 billion secret dollars that they put in a budget when no one was looking to retrofit this plane that he's going to take with him into his private life. Like that, again, if the media doesn't cover that going forward, you still have to, again, I'm sorry, blame politicians. We need Democratic Party politicians talking about this all the time in every media hit they do, bringing up Trump's corruption, bringing up the examples of corruption, saying, let's not move on. I can't believe we've moved on from January the 6th. That kills me. That should be the center of every Democrat who goes on television should begin every interview saying Donald Trump pardoned 1,600 criminals, 1,600 rioters, 600 of whom attacked police officers. Like, that should just be something you say at the beginning of every interview.
There is something we can learn from Donald Trump in terms of repetition of his message over and over and over again until it's seared in the cerebral cortexes of everybody who is 100%. Listening. And he repeats this stuff so frequently that it has to be in the news because that's what he's spoken about that day. I think there's this sense of like, okay, I want to treat my audience, speak to my audience at the height of their intelligence and not repeat something I've already said to them. But the reality is that, first of all, most people aren't listening. And second of all, you have the ability as an elected official to drive the conversation. And so use every opportunity, limited though they may be, to drive the conversation in the way that you want it to be driven. And you're exactly right. This stuff doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's not just going to, I think there's this sense that like we can all wait for this to just stay in the news, but we have agency here. We're in charge of making sure that it stays in the news. So by the way,
Peter, quick point. Peter Mandelson, who was Tony Blair's main spin doctor, main advisor, helped create New Labour, the 3 election victories in the 90s and 2000s. He had a line, which I put in my book about debate. He talked about repetition. You, as a politician, if you only when you get bored yourself of saying your message, are you even halfway towards where you need to be in message?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, how many times has Trump said, build the wall, lock her up, make America great again? There's a reason that we remember all of this stuff. There's a reason that people, even the people who have been duped, who have been gullible enough to fall for his bill of goods, that they think that's what he stands for is because he says it so many times. On the point of the media, we have seen, to switch topics here, we've seen Benjamin Netanyahu suggest that he's going to look into waging a defamation lawsuit against the New York Times for reporting about starvation in Gaza. Can I have your reaction to that?
Good luck is what I would say. Good luck with that. It's an insane position. It's interesting how many foreign politicians are now coming to sue people in the US. I know the Macrons are suing Candace Owens. The US famously was a place where you couldn't sue people, right? The First Amendment. I come from the UK, which is libel tourism home, right? That's where you go to sue people is the UK, because the courts are very friendly to the plaintiffs, not to the defendants. In the US, it's supposed to defend a free press. Let's see. Obviously, we've been seeing a very authoritarian attack on our free speech and on the First Amendment. Look, he's doing this to distract from what everyone knows, which is that the Israeli government is carrying out a genocide in Gaza. We just published a poll today, Brian, from Data for Progress, which shows that Americans, by a 14-point margin, say what is happening in Gaza is a genocide. This is no longer a debate. The American public believes it's a genocide. The top genocide scholars in the world believe it's a genocide. The International Court of Justice continues to investigate Israel for a genocide. And the Israelis keep saying genocidal things. So good luck, Benjamin Netanyahu suing the New York Times. That'll be a great bit of discovery that goes on there. Although I would say they don't need to do any discovery. What's hidden in Netanyahu's emails that they haven't said publicly? Every member of the Israeli government has said something genocidal at some point or another over the last year and a half. The heritage minister, Brian, said last week that we're gonna take over Gaza and make it Jewish again. These are the words of the heritage minister last week. The settlements minister said, we don't care about the hostages. Not about the hostages, it's about taking back Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu himself has talked about the Palestinians being Amalek, which is biblical code for kill everyone, including the donkeys and the children. So the stuff from the Israeli government has been horrific. It is one of the great tragedies in American history and one of the great stains on both our political parties that 2 presidents, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, gave Benjamin Netanyahu pretty much everything he wanted. And Biden did that disastrous hug him close strategy. We hug Bibi and then he'll do what we want him to do. He did not. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu used Biden, got everything he wanted out of Biden, $17 billion of weapons. And then he openly just counted down the clock to get Trump, so he'd get even more from Trump. And by the way, Donald Trump was asked yesterday, what do you make of Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to take over the entire Gaza Strip? And he said, well, it's up to Israel to do what they want to do. No, it's not. We fund Israel. We fund Israel. We have a right to say no.
You know, that strategy of hugging these politicians in hopes that they'll reciprocate this goodwill is a recurring theme in the Democratic Party. I mean, it's what we so often do to confer goodwill onto the other side, and maybe they'll reciprocate. I'm curious what your reaction was to the Bernie Sanders amendment blocking arms sales to Israel garnered, I think, record support among the Democratic caucus in the Senate. Still, obviously not enough to pass, but some of these even longtime pro-Israel hawks decided to vote in favor of that amendment. Can I have your reaction to that?
I was stunned. I was actually in a debate which our mutual friend Tommy Vito was moderating on Crooked with Jeremy Ben-Ami, the head of J Street, the Liberal Zionist group. And Jeremy was saying, look, Democrats are shifting. And I was like, there's not going to be a majority. And he said, yes, they will. And to be fair to Jeremy, they did get a majority of Senate Democrats for one or two of the bills. Remember, there were two votes, Brian. One was on offensive weapons and bombs. The other one was on assault rifles. And some people like Ossoff, I think, voted on rifles, yes, but not on bombs. But anyways, it was symbolically an important vote. Is it as many as I would like to see? No. By the way, we should remind everyone, every single Republican voter who was there, every single Republican senator present voted to send arms to Israel. I have been very critical of the Democratic Party's record on Gaza, on Israel, on Netanyahu. You heard me just criticize Joe Biden. Having said that, never forget the Republicans are worse. And we see that in these votes. At least some Democrats in the House and Senate are willing to take a stand for human rights, for justice, for American law, Brian. I should remind everyone, sending arms to Israel right now is a violation of two separate U.S. laws, the Leahy law, which the former senator from Vermont, Patrick Leahy, passed, which means you can't send weapons, American weapons, to a military that's clearly involved in human rights abuses. That's the Leahy law. The other law is the Foreign Assistance Act, which says you can't send weapons to a country that is blocking American aid, which again, Israel is doing in Gaza. So I would like to see every Senate Democrat come out and vote against these weapons. Sadly, the likes of Cory Booker just won't do it. John Fetterman has become this kind of pro-genocide ghoul who some of us are counting down the clock to be primaried. Sadly, he's got a lot more years in the Senate. Never has there been a bigger bait and switch, a bigger fraud, a bigger liar in the Democratic Party than John Fetterman. I'm ashamed to say I supported John Fetterman's Senate candidacy and Senate run. I defended him against Republican attacks on his health after he was elected to the Senate. And here he is cheering on a genocide happily every day. So I think there are a lot of Senate Democrats who still behave in a shameful way. But I'm glad many of them are following Bernie's lead. And credit to Bernie Sanders for leading on this issue for the last decade. But not a single Republican, not a single. In the House, Thomas Massie, yes. Marjorie Taylor Greene amazingly came out on the right side of something for once. But in the Senate, not a single one. They're all pro-genocide in the Republican Senate.
It's clear where Joe Biden stood on this issue, and so Democrats don't have a ton of political capital here. Prior to the 2024 election, there was this, or during the 2024 election, there was this sea change, especially among Muslim Americans who had voted, historically Democratic, who moved over to Donald Trump because of as a response to the way that Joe Biden comported himself with Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm curious how where do we stand right now? Because obviously Biden didn't build up any political capital with that community. What Trump is doing, I think we can all see, is to the nth degree falling off the cliff worse. And so where is this? Is this a community without a home? Like, how are you thinking about this in light of the move for that community in the 2024 election? And then these new developments, which are just so, this relative to the Biden administration, this is a whole different animal here.
It's a good question. We should just be clear that it was the Muslim community. It was young Jewish anti-Zionists. It was progressives. It was people of color. It was black pastors in Georgia, hundreds of whom wrote to Biden saying, we can't get our congregations to vote for Democratic Party if you carry on this genocide. It was a bunch of different people across the board who came out and said, we cannot do this. We can't hold our nose and vote for a party that supports genocide. And that was a completely understandable position. I made that argument. You and I discussed it before the election. I said it very clearly. I said, I think Trump is worse than Harris. But I totally understand. I would never berate someone saying, well, somebody in Michigan who's lost 20 members of their family in Lebanon or Palestine say, well, you've got to vote for the party that just helped Israel do that. Yeah, I totally understand why people stayed at home or held their noses or voted for Jill Stein or even voted for Trump. Trump, I think, got 1 in 4 Muslim votes or more, depending on which poll you look at. It's funny you mentioned historically Democratic, because if you go back to 2000, Brian, in 2000, George W. Bush won a majority of the Muslim vote, right? And then Iraq happened. And 9/11 happened, and the Democrats never looked back. Sorry, the Muslims never looked back. Muslim Americans all went to the Democratic Party, 80-20. It switched from 80-20 Republican-Democrat to 80-20 Democrat-Republican. And now I worry that the Gaza issue, Biden handled it so badly, and Harris refused to disown Biden, refused to distance herself. She had so much goodwill from that community and then refused to budge an inch on Gaza policy. And I think, I hope it's not a long-term sea change effect. I do hope that people can see what's happening to Trump. What Trump is doing is a complete betrayal of everything. He went to Dearborn, Michigan, the home of Arab America, Trump, and he said, I am peace. Kamala votes with Liz Cheney. She's campaigning with Liz Cheney. She'll take you into endless wars. I'll bring back our troops. And then what did Donald Trump do? He became the first American president to bomb Iran on behalf of Benjamin Netanyahu, something even George Bush didn't do. He's obviously given Benjamin Netanyahu carte blanche to ethnically cleanse Gaza. He's presided over the worst famine we've seen. So clearly he was not better for Palestinians. So I hope people can see that. But look, people are not stupid anymore, whether you're Muslim, Jewish, Christian, atheist, whatever background you are. People, to go back to the start of our conversation about, Mamdani types, walking both lines, people want delivery. People want to see that you're acting on your words. You're not just making promises in the air. We can have lots of Democrats say all sorts of things now about, we support this and we support that. What are you going to do when you have power, when you get back control of the Senate or House, when you get back control of the White House? Is the next presidential candidate going to say that, you know what? No more forever wars in the Middle East. I'm going to take that line back from the Republican Party that stole it and never meant it. Are they going to say no blank checks for Benjamin Netanyahu and his fascists in Israel? That's going to be a question in 2028. People like Ro Khanna are almost certainly going to run for president. And they're going to put this issue on the table, even if the Newsoms and Pritzkers and Whitmers want to run away from this issue and be like, we want to talk about kitchen table issues. There are going to be people bringing this issue up. Let's just be very clear about that. Gaza will not disappear come 2028. It's just too major an issue. And I just think Democrats are going to have to think long and hard, not just about reckoning with Biden's awful record, but what they do now going forward, what promises and pledges and action plans they can make to change our horrific foreign policy, which most Americans don't support, whether they're on the right or the left.
Let's finish off with this. In light of what we're seeing at the hands of Trump's FCC, at the hands of Trump himself, as it relates to all of these media companies, the way that he's leaned on ABC News to see them capitulate, leaned on Paramount and CBS to see them capitulate, leaned on the Washington Post, the LA Times, I mean, outlet after outlet after outlet, all of whom had said, been so quick to hide behind these slogans of democracy dies in darkness when it wasn't challenged. But the moment that it does get challenged, they all fall immediately and start heaping millions of dollars to Donald Trump, heaping him positive coverage, whatever it may be. And so how are you looking at Ziteo's place in this ecosystem in light of what we're now seeing is a pretty feckless, a pretty castrated media ecosystem from all of these legacy outlets?
To borrow a line, if Ziteo didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. I mean, I'm thinking back now. I created this company over a year ago, but let's say I hadn't, I'd be creating it right now. Because I may have created it a year ago, but never have we needed independent journalism, not just Ziteo, but what you do, what others do. We need this more than ever before, because in the last few months, we have seen the American media, and I didn't think it was possible, to be even more craven, even more of a letdown, even more of a rollover, even more complicit in authoritarianism than the last 6 months have been a horror show for our media. I mean, we're speaking, Brian, on the week where the CEO of one of the world's most powerful tech companies went into the White House with a 24-karat gold gift for Donald Trump, and then gave a speech in which he bathed Trump with sycophantic praise. Tim Cook of Apple, the man whose name Trump can't even remember, called him Tim Apple. Tim Cook went into the White House, and this billionaire CEO of Apple stood in front of the cameras and assembled some weird plaque or praise for Trump and then gave it to the president. This is where we are now. This is North Korea style moment that we're in. And I just think to myself, Apple and Bezos and the Washington Post and all of these now David Ellison, son of Larry Ellison, who was part of all the election denial meetings in the White House with Donald Trump back in 2020, allegedly. David Ellison is now owning CBS and Paramount. Like, this is where we are now. We always talk about corporate-owned media, but this is worse than just corporate-owned media. This is corporate-owned media where the corporations are run by complete weaklings or cowards or pro-Trump fascists. And this is the world we're in right now. So yes, we do need independent journalism. I would urge everyone watching to get behind independent media, because unfortunately our corporate-owned media has let us down far too much in recent months.
mean, you even look at the Smithsonian, which was literally rewriting history in deference to Trump. All of these once revered institutions are actually just betraying how weak and willing to capitulate they really are.
But the annoying thing, Brian, is like the Smithsonian, you can even make a case for like, okay, it is weak, right? It is scared of the government. There will be consequences if they try and stand up to Trump. In a sense, as much as they are cowards, I kind of get the cowardice. What I can't forgive is the Cooks and Bezoses of this world. Like, what is the point?
Who have all the money in the world, all the power
as the
in
phrase
the
goes,
world.
As the phrase goes, Brian, what is the point of having fuck you money if you don't say fuck you, right?
Yeah.
Why be a billionaire? Why be the second richest man in the history of the world, Jeff Bezos, but run to the inauguration and stand and heap praise on Trump and wreck the Washington Post, which, it's just so depressing to watch and so infuriating and so unforgivable.
Well, look, you have been, I think there's nobody who doubts the fact that you have been absolutely fearless in speaking out. Highly recommend for everybody who's watching right now, if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to go subscribe to Zateo's YouTube channel. I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description. If you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. Please help support, build up independent progressive media. Very important. Does not cost anything to go subscribe to the YouTube channel, but it helps elevate voices like Mehdi's, which are so needed right now. Mehdi, as always, I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Brian.